Hello there, Internet Magic Man here from MMOBomb.com, bringing you another episode of Ask MMOBomb, the show where you ask questions and we give you answers, no matter how bizarre the questions may be. So let's just jump right into today's questions. Alright, our first question comes from Inflictious, longtime contributor to the site, who says, why don't companies just put gold in their cash shops, or any of their in-game currencies in their cash shops? To me, and again, this is going to be heavy personal opinion, there are some games that do that, obviously, where they do allow you to buy whatever the main in-game currency is, gold, platinum, whatever, diamonds, with cold hard cash. There are some free-to-play games that do that. Looking at the broad scope of games, though, you don't see a whole lot of games doing it, and I think it's for a few reasons. I think your question comes from a logical standpoint, is, one, the companies would make money, right? Because people would buy it from their cash shop, so they would make the money. There would be less incentives for gold farming or gold selling and spamming of that type of thing in-game, because the company makes it readily available to its own consumers at a reasonable rate. And so what's the incentive to spend time farming it there to try and sell it? So I think it comes from a logical standpoint, but if you think about it a little more, there's a stigma that goes with it. When you start putting currency in the cash shop as an option to just buy flat out, trade USD for in-game gold, or trade the euro for in-game gold directly through whatever company, there's a big stigma with that goes in the whole pay-to-win category. It may not be equipment-based, right? Maybe all the equipment the best equipment in the game isn't even available using gold in-game. Maybe it's only available through certain accomplishments, dungeons, raids, PvP, that type of thing. But most games have some aspect of, particularly endgame stats, that could be influenced through gold, in-game currency, whether that's enchanting of gear, gemming of gear. I know a big topic for Alad's players is the runes that you come across and have to put in for endgame there. And yes, you can. I don't think that's necessarily pay to win, because you can get them at the cash shop, but I can understand how a lot of people would think it's pay to win because, I'm sorry, the auction house, not the cash shop. But I can understand where some people would view it as pay to win, because the time invested to farm up that amount of gold to buy them from somebody that's selling them could be pretty extensive. So there's a stigma of pay to win that goes with that, because there's usually some component of endgame play that gold can influence. The other stigma with that is that it makes the companies look greedy. You know, and they're devaluing their own in-game currency in the minds of a lot of gamers, whether it's accurate or not, that they're devaluing their own in-game gold by placing a real-world dollar amount on it and making it readily available. What's the point in farming it up if I could just buy it? And at that point, what's the point for the in-game currency as a whole? There should just be some other system to accomplish things or gain other things. So there's those two stigmas that go with it. As soon as you hear a game is selling its own gold, you automatically, instinctively think, okay, there's going to be some pay-to-win component there. People who shell out for the in-game currency are going to have some type of advantage, even if it's just a minor equipment tweak advantage. And then there's also that element of, man, this company is so greedy, they're selling their own currency. So they're basically making the in-game currency worthless, since it can be obtained in small amounts or huge amounts. Now, again, that could vary by game, but those are two stigmas that pop into your head as soon as you hear companies doing that. And so companies, rightfully so, avoid it a lot of the time because of that. What you are seeing more of, which I am in favor of, and you saw this with Guild Wars 2, and I'm trying to remember what game. Oh, I think it was Neverwinter in the closed beta weekend, where you're starting to see a lot of companies not selling the gold or the in-game currency directly for the cash shop currency, but more people that want to spend money on the cash shop currency and convert it to in-game currency have the ability to sell it at their own price points. So it lets the market dictate how much 1 gold equals in USD, or how much 1 gold equals in the euro. So I do like that aspect. I mean, that's pretty much a real economy, or an aspect of a real economy, when you have currency trading. The value of the dollar is less than the value of the euro. There is a perceived value difference between the two, and everybody agrees on the value difference. And so you have people making money by switching currencies at various points and taking advantage of that. I do like that aspect of MMOs where the company says, we're not going to sell the currency, but we're going to give you, the player, the ability to sell your cash shop currency for in-game currency at a price you dictate, and other people are going to be dictating their price too, and the market will decide, the sellers and the buyers will decide what the actual exchange rate should be. I actually like that. It's a real-world economic policy that you can take advantage of in games, and you can find a good deal occasionally, and you can make a good deal occasionally, depending on which currency you're looking for and who happens to be selling it and whatever the going rate is. It's kind of like that capitalist free market thing, you know, let the buyer choose which companies, or in this case, which players thrive and which don't, based on supply and demand. I think it's actually obviously a little more ideal than the real world. But so I think that's what I would be in favor of seeing more of in games, especially in free-to-play games. There's the argument that there shouldn't be that aspect in a buy-to-play or a subscription-based game at all, because you are shelling out real money to even get in the game. So I can definitely hear that side of the argument, but from a free-to-play standpoint, I'm a huge proponent of letting the players decide the exchange rate for cash shop versus in-game currency. And I think, to your question specifically, companies avoid it because it's hard to balance around without it being pay to win in some regards, even if it's something as simple as the gems you put in your gear. And there's a perceived greediness of a company and their title when they do something like that. So, hope that answers your question. Let's get to the next question. Alright, so Zhao Yun asks me, Zhao knows that I am a huge Final Fantasy freak, and a lot of you probably already know that already. But Zhao Yun asks me if I think any Final Fantasy MMO will ever be free to play. Okay. Sidebar here. I don't count Final Fantasy XIV's initial launch and subsequent 10 months or so of free-to-play as the game being free-to-play. That was made free-to-play because it was in virtually an unplayable condition when they first started out, and they didn't want to charge while people played, and they tried to revamp the systems a little bit while the game was live. So we're going to discount that and go under the banner of Final Fantasy MMOs have never been free-to-play. Because Final Fantasy XI was at launch and is still to this day a sub-based game. And Final Fantasy XIV was constructed with a subscription in mind when it launched. Yes, they took the subscription away and then they added it back in, but it was there, the game's designed for it, and Final Fantasy XIV, A Realm Reborn, when it relaunches later this year, is already declared a sub-based game when it comes out. So we're going to go with both Final Fantasy Onlines currently were sub-based and are sub-based. Now, do I think any future Final Fantasy MMOs will be free to play? No. And I'm going to put two reasons on this. The first is probably the one you're already thinking of. There may not ever be another Final Fantasy MMO. I can't see them putting any more money into the MMO market, them being Square Enix. I can't see Square Enix putting any more money into the MMO market under the Final Fantasy banner and IP if Final Fantasy XIV, A Realm Reborn, relaunches and has the same or similar results as its initial launch. Square Enix took a bloodbath over that. I mean, catastrophic losses to the point where they readily, publicly admit a lot of their IPs suffered and never made it to market simply because of that game. So if it doesn't take off, then I could see a situation where there's never another Final Fantasy MMO. Let's say it does moderately well, at least to the point that Square Enix would consider in the future another MMO. I don't think it would be free to play. Yes, we all know that that's kind of the trend right now, or even go buy to play with no subscription, but Square Enix is not the type of company that's going to give up the Final Fantasy license to a free-to-play experience. And I think it would be a lot harder to sell. A lot of people would play it, no doubt. But I think the people that were your core Final Fantasy XI audience will be your core Final Fantasy XIV audience if it's playable. Those types of players would almost rather buy it or sub to it to have the same type of experience that you have in those in-depth MMOs. I don't think your core base wants it to be free to play. The general population may, but the core base, and I might take some flack for saying this, I have to assume that Square Enix is only interested in its core base at this point. We're not seeing the marketing blitz for Final Fantasy XIV relaunching this time, and that goes into beta, closed beta, any day now. Mid-February was the target. But we still don't have a media PR blitz because I think they're so focused on, let's just get our Final Fantasy core back that we pissed off with the launch of 14. So I don't think that core base wants the game to be free to play. They would rather pay to have the same very in-depth experience they've had in the previous two. So that leaves the very last possibility. I gave you two reasons why I don't think any future Final Fantasies MMOs will be free. But that leaves two options still on the table. Will 14 go free at any time, or will the decade-old 11 go free to play anytime? And I gotta say no. 14 can't go free to play. 14 will close before it goes free to play. If it bombs to the point on the relaunch where they're even considering free to play, they will close it and cut their losses and get out, which some may argue they should have done after the first launch went so horribly. Final Fantasy XI's still been going strong for a decade now. It's getting a new expansion pack in about a month and a half. It still carries its subscription. That's going to be the game that while it's alive, it's going to be a sub-based, and then it's going to die. And there's no way Square Enix lets anybody else publish these. At least I don't think. They don't turn over the Final Fantasy name to some other publisher and say, we don't want to do it anymore, you can, and you can make it free to play if you want. Not going to happen. So, there you go. If 14 A Realm Reborn sucks, I don't think you'll see another Final Fantasy MMO, period. So, no. 2, if the core player base still enjoys 14, and they still enjoy 11, they're not going to want, in my opinion, a free-to-play Final Fantasy. I wouldn't even, for the experiences I had in 11 for, 8 to 10 years, I wouldn't even fathom that game being free-to-play, because I would just look at what would the restrictions be, and how heavy would they be. And I think most Final Fantasy Online fans are like me in that respect, where they go, you know what, I don't want any type of restrictions on this at all. I'll pay you $10 a month, or $12.99 a month, or $15.99 a month, whatever it is in your area. And then I don't see 14 or 11 going free to play. I see them shutting down before they go free to play. So there you go. Good old screensaver. Next question. Okay, so Fire Axis asks. Fire Axis wants to know, in the current trend of MMORPGs, we're seeing a lot more games get away from the Holy Trinity, or the MMO Trinity, with a tank, a healer, and DPS classes. So games like Guild Wars 2 have exemplified that. Now, Fire Axis says that they feel like that's kind of solo playing in a group. Everybody just kind of bum rushes and does their thing and, you know, dodges and heals themselves and things like that. Do I think that there's still room in the MMO space for games based on the MMO Trinity of a tank, a healer, and a DPS? Absolutely. And Fireaxis also pointed out that they believe this causes more camaraderie between classes because there's an interreliance on the classes and each other to do their job. And I totally agree. I do think that the core mechanic, tank, healer, DPS, definitely still has a place in the MMO market. Now, if it stays like that, I think it will eventually die out. What I think we need to see is kind of a balance between the two. If I'm being totally honest, I'm not a huge fan of running dungeons in Guild Wars 2. I am a huge fan of running dungeons or raids in games that have more Trinity-based mechanics. So if I'm being honest, that's where I fall, is that I'm more towards the Trinity side than I am towards like what Guild Wars 2 does. Because it does feel rather like I just happen to be in this area with a bunch of people and we all have the same objective. So I'm kind of with Fireaxis on this one. I think we do need to start shifting to more of a middle balance. Now, whether that's a tank, a healer, and a DPS, I don't know if that's the long-term answer, because it does start to feel like a dated mechanic. Taunt, 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 stand in the green shit, stand in the green shit, get out of the red shit, stand in the green shit. You know, it does start to feel a little bit dated. But I think that we can find a small balance, or some company's going to get this right. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's Carbine Studios with WildStar, as much as I lament the fact that they still have no idea when they're releasing. I think WildStar might get a portion of this right, if not the entire thing. I think we need to have that reliance on each other for group dynamic content, but maybe not to the point of, you are a tank, you are the DPS, you are the healer, go do your thing, let's get through it. I think that is too stagnant a mold. I think the players now, especially myself and most MMO players I talk to and game with, you want more versatility. You don't want to roll a tank. You don't want to roll a healer. Yes, you may like those classes. I prefer tanks over DPS and healers myself, if I have to choose one. But I would like one to be a little more dynamic than, oh, he's X class, he's X spec, you are a tank, my friend. And so I think players like that flexibility, but I think Guild Wars 2 might have gone a little too far with it and just said, we don't need the Trinity at all. So I think there's got to be a balance struck, where you still depend on the other players, but you maybe don't depend on them for the same reasons, right? You depend on the tank to hold aggro. You depend on the healer to heal you. I think we can kind of maybe get a game that shifts a little towards the middle, where I'm depending on other people, but maybe not for that specific a thing. Maybe I'm depending on you as the archer, because in this encounter, there is a situation that an archer is best suited for. Now, whether that archer is built for burst damage or DOT, whatever, that's the archer's choice to be making, how they want to play that archer. But we need that type of ranged combat, whether it's to hold things at bay or take things down, or just keep them busy while we're doing something else over here. I think that's where we kind of need to get to, where we still depend on each other. It's not so much, hey, just don't die and we'll be fine. As long as all of us are up, we'll be able to take this thing down. But it's getting away from a Trinity-based system. Long story there. It's just my feeling, though, and I hope Carbine starts to push this a little bit. And I think they are, with the way their classes are set up, what each of them can do. If you haven't read up on, and I wish they would announce whether it's going to be free-to-play or not, because if it's going to be free-to-play, then, man, I'm going to plaster the site with stuff. I'm excited about WildStar, but I'm losing my edge, because I'm not as hyped as I was for it anymore. But they did release some rating information. Take a look at it. Google it. and take a look at it. And some of the dynamics there, I think, really create interdependency without locking you into a trinity. Short answer, too long, didn't listen. Yes, there's still a space for the Trinity MMO in MMOs. However, I think if games don't start getting away from it just a little bit, but keeping the dependency aspect, then we're in for a world of trouble over the next decade for MMOs. There you go. Next question. All right, our next question comes from the email. It's from Adam. If you don't give me a handle, I just got to use your first name, so hope that's okay. This is from Adam, who wonders, what do I think products like the Oculus Rift bring to the MMO space? Sorry, involuntary shudder. Nothing good yet. Nothing good. At least in my opinion. I don't think virtual reality or the Oculus Rift or insert virtual reality device here, I don't think that it bodes well for being interactive with the MMO space just yet. First off, I think anytime you ask somebody to put something on their head or their face, whether it's a helmet, a visor, hell, there are people, most people, complain about 3D televisions because they have to wear glasses to use them. And that's just, a couple ounces worth of plastic and some glass. Or, in the case of cheaper glasses, plastic and plastic. People don't like that. They don't like having to put something on their head. And your head's heavy, man. You got a big melon, that's heavy. And your neck, it's made for your head. And when you put something else on that dome piece, and it sits there for a long time, your neck doesn't feel so good. And most of us MMO players, we don't sit down and play for half an hour, right? We don't, it's not a console game where we jump in and we bang out a few Mario levels and then we go to work. It's, when we sit down to MMO, man, we're with our buds and we MMO for hours. Can you imagine having something added to your head for hours and then try to take it off and see what your neck's going through? I don't think anything attaching to the facial area is a good idea for the MMO space yet. Does that mean that virtual reality isn't going to try? No, they're definitely going to try. And you'll see MMOs. I mean, Hawken is already touting that it is Oculus Rift approved or functional. They just got to wait for the Oculus Rift to come out. So there will definitely be games that try. I think games like Hawken might be okay with doing something like that. I don't see people sitting and playing Hawken for 6-7 hours on end on a weekend because it's raining outside. Which, by the way, sorry I'm inside again, but it's snowing and it's freezing cold outside. And I wasn't going to do another freezing cold episode. I love doing this outdoors at different locations, but the weather is just not being nice in January and February. So I apologize for being at my computer again. But Hawken, I think, is the type of game that might lend itself to experimenting with Oculus Rift. I don't think as far as in-depth MMORPGs, you're going to see anything anytime soon. You may see one or two game companies give it a go and try something with it. But as far as long-term virtual reality in MMORPGs, we are just not there yet to the point where MMORPG players are going to be willing to adopt something for long gaming sessions in their favorite MMO. I think it's going to be relegated to things like the shooters, the first-person shooters. I don't even see MOBAs touching it right away. MOBAs, MMORPGs, they're going to stay away from it. Shooters will attempt it. Some shooters will attempt it. But I think that's the limit of where you're going to see it cross into the MMO space, is a shooter or a game from a genre typical or similar to a shooter. A game that you don't really sit and play for. Some people do, don't get me wrong, but most people don't sit there and play for 5 to 7 hours because it's raining outside. They play for an hour or two and then they bounce to something else. I think those will be the only games to adopt it, particularly the Oculus Rift in its early days. I don't see virtual reality impacting the MMO space as a whole across all genres for quite some time. I think there's got to be technology that instead of actually asking the user to equip something to just their face, you know, there's got to be a change in the technology, whether that's taking this type of monitor and making a different type of display. You've seen those guys that love to do the car racing games, and they've got like the 4-monitor spread, and it covers the entire peripheral vision and stuff like that. I think when you start experimenting with that type of technology and how you can immerse somebody into a virtual world that way, I think MMO players will be much more willing to accept that than to sit here with, you know, this thing strapped to my face and playing whatever for 5 or 6 hours. I just don't think that's going to work. Maybe for shooters, Adam. Maybe for shooters right away. But I don't see it penetrating the market, the MMO space, any further than that for quite some time until the technology gets incredibly light or incredibly cheap. That's another factor that I'm not even going to talk about, is cost. They're going to have to make it incredibly light to the point where it's like a 3D pair of glasses, because that's the extent at which people are just like, you know what, I even hate wearing those, but I'll wear them. So, unfortunately, I think we're still quite a ways off. I think you're going to see more interactivity with the monitors than you will actual virtual reality in an MMO space. Interesting question, though. I wonder what your thoughts are. Put them in the comments below. Make sure, while you're there, you put questions for next week's show. If you don't submit questions, I got no show for you to do and for me to do. And I like doing the show, and I hope you like watching it. So put your questions below. As you can see, I try to keep them free-to-play related, but I'll take crazy ones occasionally as well. So with that in mind, let's get to the next question. All right, Mental Dagger says, what MMO do you think has the best controller functionality? Now, Mental Dagger thought that Rusty Hearts was pretty damn good. And I agree. Any of those arcadey action-type games do lend themselves to a controller really well. Dark Blood did that. Of course, Rusty Hearts does that. I know people with games like Vindictus and Dragon Nest and C9 and those types of games, people do mapped controllers really successfully. Even some more MMOs like Terra, they do support the controller functionality. It starts to get a little dicey because now you're talking about a lot more abilities than you have buttons. So what MMO do I think has the best controller functionality? I think it's a tie between two games, but I'm going to give the edge to one simply because it's older. Final Fantasy XI and DCUO, or DC Universe Online, to me, personally, have the best as far as MMORPGs. You took Rusty Hearts, so I'm going to stay away from the arcadey action and pick something else, because Rusty Hearts is a damn good example. Final Fantasy XI and DC Universe Online, to me, have the best controller functionality. The reason why, they were predominantly designed to be a console MMO. DCUO was designed in mind as a PS3 MMO that happened to be ported to computer. I actually prefer to play DCUO on my PlayStation 3 than my computer, simply because the controls are tighter on the PS3, because that's what the game was designed for. Final Fantasy XI was also designed with a console in mind, the PS2 at that time. That's where the Final Fantasy Online first launched for the consoles, was on the PS2, and then later moved to the Xbox 360. Demina and I have played it on all three. Both of us prefer to play it on a console. And it's kind of a cheap reason why Final Fantasy XI wins. I mean, it's older, so I'm going to give Final Fantasy XI the edge, but DCUO is very close. The reason Final Fantasy XI works so well, though, is because Final Fantasy XI was menu-based. If you played it for any long period of time, you know that it was easy. Shoulder buttons, left, right, down, and up, and X. Boom, 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 boom. Because it was all menu-based. So it lent itself to a controller in a different way than Rusty Hearts does. It lent itself to a controller because a controller was easier to navigate menus than using the keyboard and then trying to toggle between different modes on the keyboard. So Final Fantasy XI gets the edge for age, and because it was menu-based, but I'm also a huge fan of DCUO PlayStation 3 controller functionality as well. All right, let's get to today's last question. Alright, so Franolio wants to know, what MMOs do I play in my spare time? Okay, I don't have a lot of spare time right now. I work a full-time job during the day, Monday through Friday, and sometimes on the weekends. I have a great flexibility with my job so that I can bounce back and forth between things and basically make my own schedule, but I still have a job to do. I'm married to Domina. I have 3 children. And then I make some of the first looks, the Ask MMOBomb, the free-to-play cast, different articles for the website itself, and then, of course, interacting with the community on Bomb Live, or just replying to emails and YouTube comments and site comments. So all that stuff together adds up to a lot of time. Am I asking you to feel pity? No. I absolutely choose to do all of that stuff, plus some extracurricular stuff with local theater and things like that, and the magic. So, as in Sawing Women in Half, not as in The Gathering, tap that. So, yeah, I don't have a lot of free time, but when I do, lately, I've been playing a lot of Terra, a lot of the Secret World. I know it's not free to play, but I'm just going to give you a whole list here. Terra, which, by the way, I'm on Tempest Reach if you want to hang out and play. So is Domina. You can watch the first look and get my character name. I'll make you look for it. That way, if you want to play, I know at least you took the initiative to look for it. So Terra, the Secret World. Aeon, I bounce in and out of an awful lot. Subscription-based, I bounce in and out of Rift a lot. That's one of those games where I'll sub for 2 months and play it like crazy and then not sub for 3 months. So those are the 4 core games that I'm kind of in and out of right now. And that, of course, is going to change. I would love to tell you that I'm in Guild Wars 2, but I'm just not anymore. I can't tell you the last time I sat down and played Guild Wars 2 for longer than 40 minutes. And it's not that it's a bad game, it's just that it's just not for me. Beautiful game. I love some of the presentational tweaks that they put on it and everything. I don't think it does anything terribly new. I think it takes some MMO conventions and presents them in a different way, which there's something to be said for that as well. But yeah, so Terra, Aeon, The Secret World, Rift. What else do I have over here if I'm jumping in anything lately? MMO-wise, that's it. I don't play Star Wars anymore. I don't play Guild Wars 2. I don't play World of Warcraft. Final Fantasy 11 I jump into now and then, but I wouldn't say I'm playing it. So yeah, let's just stick to those 4. There you go. And you're more than welcome to hunt me out in-game, and if you want to hang out, that's cool. If I'm busy doing something, I'll tell you, hey, it's really cool, but I can't hang out right now. I'm doing something. So, but yeah, there you go. So 4 games. Well, that's all the time we have for today, gang. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please remember, submit your questions. Last week was very light on the questions because everybody was debating whether consoles or PC or MMOs should be on consoles at any point, or if they should just stay on PCs. Some people forgot that there's already MMOs on consoles, I guess. But that's okay. Everybody had some really cool opinions. It was nice. But some of you forgot your questions. Submit them below. Come on over to MMOBomb.com. Put them in the comments there. Or email them directly to magicman@MMOBomb.com. Love my shirt. Credit to a viewer here who sent me the link for it. My Magic Missile shirt that I had to hunt down from Jinx. The hoodie was sold out and they're not going to restock it. But I love me some Magic Missiles, so here we go. Thanks for the shout out there. Until next time, gang, as always, this is Magic Man saying stay safe, and we'll see you on the servers.
So I'm out here doing work, then I get the party popping, cause with every minute wasting, know my chances steady dropping.